So welcome to the ACC lecture of today. We have with us Luigi, Savio, that with Mattia, Marcello, and Davide is member of Abnormal Collective based in Milan and Rotterdam. In their work, they explore the strong relation between real and virtual, participating in several works with the Triennale di Milano. They are a multidisciplinary collective with a particular focus on architectural representation and spatial narrative. They found inspiration from movie, novels, and artists, resorting objects in different representations and translate their architectural fantasy. For the lecture of today, titled Shared Screen Architecture, they give us some interesting keywords as Zoom Party, Digital Chroma, Disco Streaming, Live Twitch, camgirl, and camboy, that can translate their work, the dichotomy between real and virtual in the domestic space and television sets. So I would like to thank Luigi to be with us, and I'm very interested to hear from you, and I'm going to leave the floor to you to start your lecture. So thank you. The microphone, it's good.
Thank you, Rossella. Thank you for the amazing introduction, and thanks to the student for the video that was quite emotional for me to see all the works in Abnormal made by Abnormal in a video. So I will start briefly to share the lecture with you. Yes. Okay, can you see the screen?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, so the title of this lecture is Shared Screen Architecture, and it's a lecture that we started to present quite recently, and it's the beginning of a long-lasting research that we hope to develop in the next year. But I would like to introduce the work of Abnormal first. So as Rossella said, we founded our collective in 2017, when Marcello, Davide, Mattia, and myself were working in Rotterdam, and we've been working in OMA for quite a long time. And as a junior architect in OMA, we were involved in the developing of concept phase and competition documents, and often involved in the production of images to explain and describe the project. And most of the time, these images were asked to be quite photorealistic, and in order to be sold in the most romantic and emotional way somehow. And this created a sort of frustration for us, since in many cases we have been asked to reproduce and simulate a certain kind of light, a certain kind of atmosphere, and a certain kind of environment that was like propagating a very quite mainstream idea of architecture. Just to say some example, like the light always has to be a light of from the sunset or from the sunrise, and the environmental condition always simulate a sort of Northern European situation, and also the perspective, the output of the camera has to be the most dramatic somehow. And of course, this was this was happening in a moment in which a certain kind of discourse on architectural representation started, and there was criticizing this exploitation of the rendering tool. We were part of this discourse, of course, but from another side, we wanted to use rendering tools in another way, in order to use it in a more mature and critical, using it from a more mature and critical point of view. We started like to experiment with the layer that create the photorealism, messing up with these components. We created these three-dimensional collages that doesn't use lights or shadow to describe geometries, but instead use the normal vectors. And that was the starting point. We were very loved with the output of these images, super colorful and quite weird somehow. Then we started to create our collaboration. But soon enough, I moved away from Rotterdam. Also, Marcello moved in Switzerland, and we somehow were scattered around Europe. And this diagram that you see now describes quite well the working environment we have been experiencing until recently. As you can see, we always collaborate remotely in the production process, but then oddly enough, we meet physically during the opening of our exhibition. And this is quite weird, of course. So as I was saying, we started to produce these images as a three-dimensional pastiche of formal obsession that never got through the concept phase, or obsolete 3D object that we found scrolling the internet, and we put everything together in this kind of pictures that somehow all together give a quite distinctive description of the digital environment and what is the digital environment today. The image that you see now, it's part of our production, collect many of the things that we find in the newspaper and that we read in very old blogs telling about conspiracy theories and so on. And this kind of news collapse into our vision somehow. And well, this, of course, it's a kind of sensibility that it's not new. It comes out from past experience, like for instance, the Vittoriale by D'Annunzio, where he collected all his objects. And we think that this kind of sensibility results in an unconscious description of a personality. In the case of D'Annunzio, of course, it works in this way, but we believe that also it happens for everybody when we collect objects in our computer that we don't want to delete because, I don't know, like in a certain moment we could they could become necessary. And this created, it's part of a phenomenon called the digital hoarding, which is the excessive acquisition and reluctance to delete electronic material. And we believe that it's affecting us, of course. And somehow our work as abnormal result in a graphic novel that for us personally work as a sort of collective therapy. That allow us to unleash phantoms of our architectural experience, professional experience somehow. So this is again collage of our images, and of course through the years we've been asked to participate to many exhibitions reproducing our image in a physical artifact. In this case, this is a curtain we produced for the Swiss Architectural Museum that was put at the entrance of the exhibition called Dictelust, an exhibition that was trying to dig into the most unconscious and most, let's say, sensual aspect of urban design, which is very odd point of view. But I think we kind of course, we fit quite well in the description. And I mean, we started also to formalize our working process as a kind of sensibility towards technology, that exploit technology in a not efficient way in order to using that in a more artistic way, say in a more critical way. We started also to explore spatial design. In the case of the image that you're looking at now, this is an exhibition design we produced on occasion of the Biennale, the Ljubljana Biennale, and it's a spatial design to reorganize the archive of a dance choreographer, Rock Vervaar. And in this case, we use facial recognition as a tool for categorizing movement of the choreographies and part of the body, giving to the archive this kind of key lecture. In the case of the image that you see now, instead, we work on the idea of cuteness and cute technology, trying to counteract this phenomena to which technology is told as sensual and as attractive. In fact, most of the design, let's take Apple, for example, technology, the components of technology are covered by a mask of cuteness. In reversing this process, we expose completely the technology that usually we find around in the urban environment in this kind of sculpture, which is a very stark and quite intimidating object that collect all technology for surveillance, for let's say energy autonomy, and usually are all the technology that made prepperism possible, let's say. And we've been very inspired by the text written by Rainier Banham called "A Home is Not a House," which is probably the first text that foreseen the phenomena of disappearance of architectural space for the sake of technological comfort. Since then, we started to research about this relation between technology and space in different scale. The project that I'm showing now, probably it's the second or third time I'm showing this project. It's called Googleburg, and it's a research project, speculative project, that try to answer to the question, can a state become a machine? Which is a provocative question, of course, that has been formulated to give a certain depiction of how the physical infrastructure of technology has becoming so important that could replace an entire state. Googleburg is based on the idea that the economical power of technological corporation, big tech, is reaching a critical point up to the point that is probably more powerful than a smaller state. We took the case of Luxembourg because Luxembourg is based on a very weak sovereignty that can be acted according to market logic. In fact, Google wanted to acquire part of the soil of Luxembourg for building one of the biggest data centers in Europe. This is a very quite schematic research on the network infrastructure on the planetary scale. You can see transoceanic cable and the distribution of data center around the globe, and as you can see, it's quite uneven. It doesn't reflect the idea of internet as accessible to everybody and homogeneously distributed on the planet and let's say ephemeral. Instead, this picture shows how the distribution of the network infrastructure follow market economy and geopolitical logics. This instead is a comparison between the land use of Luxembourg together with the distribution of data center on the Luxembourg territories. And with the big G, there is the future, the size of the future data center run by Google in Luxembourg. And as you can see, the dimension of the data center is probably is comparable to the dimension of all the data center already present in Luxembourg. In magenta, in the color magenta, there is the agricultural land that are completely left abandoned because Luxembourg converted its economy in the late 50s, 60s to fintech. And leaving completely unused this amount of soil, which is basically the 40% of Luxembourg territories. So we kind of speculate on the idea that starting from this and the little village that was acquired by Google, a network of small data centers could cover completely this unused land, providing a new kind of agriculture, which is precision agriculture, which is exploiting a lot of technology to do that. It's almost completely automized. This could be possible hacking two laws inside the legislation of Luxembourg that are the expropriation for public necessities and the economical benefit of agricultural activities. And we substitute the public necessity with corporation necessity, with Google necessity. And hijacking these two laws, a new kind of state comes out, a parallel state called Googleburg that was like completely sovereign and covering the entire soil of Luxembourg. Of course, and creating, of course, a new kind of environment, sort of techno-pastoral environment, where people use technology and trust in technology without understanding technology, somehow behaving towards technology in a very primitive way, a kind of sensibility that comes out from the experience of the radicals in the 60s, like, for instance, the Foremost Super Studio, but also others, like Gruppo 9999 or Archizoom and so on. This project has also its own continuation. We develop a physical installation, which is called Machine of Loving Grace, together with another collective in Milan called CAPTCHA, because also CAPTCHA was developing a similar research to Googleburg, so we decided to put everything together in this installation. Since the starting point of the two research was this poem written by Richard Brotigan called All Watch Over by Machines of Love and Grace, in which the poet described a future run completely by the algorithm, which is for taking care of the coexistence between animal, human, and technology, which we find very compelling somehow. And we wanted to translate this into a physical art piece, translating the poem in Java code and printing the poem in a 30-meter fabric that was revolving around this 7 moving cylinder moved by a very low-tech engine that you can see in this image on the left bottom corner. And yes, this is one of the some other image of the project. So somehow until then, we were kind of developing research that were looking for the physical infrastructure of the internet and how this technology is impacting on a territorial scale and has its own geopolitical reason. The research that I'm showing now, shared screen architecture, instead it's a research that tries to unveil the relation between technology and domestic space, and in specific is trying to study how the relation between technology and domestic space is completely transfigured by the compulsive use of social networks, and so how somehow, in other words, we are abandoning the physical space for the sake of the digital environment. Again, we started with the diagram made by François Dallegret together with Rainier Banham, and which is describing in images the text of Rainier Banham, "The home is not a house," because somehow like this diagram is very telling about the interpreting between domestic space and technology, and how domestic space is completely depleted by the presence of technology for comfort. But when we speak about shared screen architecture, of course, we are pointing to the space of the spectacle and how the space of the spectacle, so to say, theater, cinema, or TVs, is collapsing into one single space coupled with the domestic space. Through the introduction of streaming social networks such as Twitch or TikTok or other social networks. We started this research coming back to the project of the Radio City Musical, which is a theater in New York, built, I guess, around the late 30s. And it's a project that comes out of the vision, comes out of the mind of one of the most important theater entrepreneur called Roxy Rothafel, this guy here. And he has a very peculiar idea of how the future of theater should be. And he envisioned spectacle that could simulate the cycle of day and night and compress the cycle into few hours through the use of technology. The design of the theater itself recall the picture of sunset, as you can see in this image, and at the center of the theater there is a revolving stage. So all the building is built and designed as a giant machine. In fact, reading through the text that describe this project, there is written that the project involved the use of a huge elevator a huge escalator. They were like lifting animals through the building, lifting a huge machine, and were kind of enabling an artificial environment, which was also based on the use of some certain kind of gas and chemical substances that inhalated were producing in the spectators a passive attraction, let's say. So in this case, there is a strict subdivision between the actors that is exploiting machine and technology to create spectacles, and the spectators itself. The two figures are completely divided and are mediated, and their interaction are mediated by through technology. This is again Roxy Rothfeld. And I mean, the project of the Radio City musical is probably the model for the set design of TV shows. The image that you see here, it's one screenshot of one of the most famous TV shows in Italy, called Ruota della Fortuna, and which was run by Mike Bongiorno, one of the most famous anchormen in Italy. And again, as you can see in the image, there is again a revolving stage. There is this use and the simulation of a technological environment. In this case, it's very abstract. The environment around is designed to be colorful, attractive, and sensual, but not through the simulation of reality, but through the presentation of an abstractness. These are other images of future development of TV shows. Again, there is a revolving wheel you can activate without knowing how the wheel works. It's really like a sort of surrender to technology, wishing for luck. Then something happened, and the introduction of certain kind of TV shows in the United States, like for instance the Max Headroom TV shows, assign a switch in the set design history somehow, because the use of this very flat and abstract background is putting all the lights and all the focus on one single human figure. In this case, it's a transfigured human figure. Let's say it's a completely transformed and human figure to somehow simulate an embryonic idea of artificial intelligence. Instead, this is not a robot, the guy that you see here, but it's an actor using lots of silicon to simulate the feature of a robot. But still, the relation between the spectator and the actor, in this case a fictional character, it's quite strict. There is a wall of technology separating people that are watching from people that are acting. But this somehow collapsed at a certain point at the end of the 80s. We think that the Max Headroom incident is probably the event that signed the end of this era. In 1987, some hackers hijacked the radio frequencies of the national television in the United States, replacing their odd and vulgar TV shows, replacing the football match with their odd and vulgar TV show. That was mocking the Max Headroom TV shows, as you can see in this image. And this, of course, was the first breach that destroyed this wall of technology, and was opening a gate for the spectators to interact with the spectacle itself. And it was one of the most, let's say, one of the most famous moment in American television, up to the point that many formats were developed after that to be very intrusive and to be very pervasive, and they have as an object the description of domestic life. All the series of reality TV show like the Big Brother are exactly that. Somehow they are staging real life, and this somehow was very attractive for the spectator. So the spectator is a spectacle itself, and this was, of course, at the beginning of let's say mid-90s, beginning of 2000, right before the introduction of social network. Well, after that, this process of intrusion on the domestic life was completely accelerated. The image that you see now, it's a screenshot from a streaming. The guy in front of you, it's Omniatol. It's one of the foremost streamer in Italy. Probably some of you know him. And he became famous because he brought in Italy a format of streaming called IRL, which is the acronym for in real time. And basically, the format structure as a mise-en-scene of reality somehow, of his life, is going around the cities, meeting people and chatting with them, and connected through Twitch, thousands of spectators can interact with the urban environment. In specific, he allow people connected to his stream to use a small audio speaker, paying some money, to interact with the environment and to interact with the people around him. And of course, most of the people interact in the most vulgar way to provocate a reaction somehow and create a pop-up spectacles, let's say. So this mise-en-scene of the domestic life in our mind reckon the experience of Absalom, which is an Israeli artist that was performing domestic action in a very abstract way. So the background completely disappear. There's no set design anymore. Actually the design is outside. These are some of the shells he built to perform his artwork, and he scattered these let's say bunkers all around the planet in the most populated metropolis, starting to go around the globe and perform this weird action. So this was, let's say, until the beginning of the social network era. And this is instead the environment in which we live every day, which is a collection, a matrix collection of domestic spaces that are now a backdrop of spectacles. So there is no set design anymore, but there is house design. And in some way, this is much more entertaining than former TV shows, than established TV shows, because it allows people to become voyeur, and it allows people to express their voyeuristic attitude. And of course, I mean, not everything is left undesigned. In some cases, the design of the backdrop, it shows the establishment of a certain kind of power. As you can see here in the Obama example, or foremost probably the example of Berlusconi. I'm sorry for the screenshot, I didn't find anything more, a bigger image. But in any case, everybody remembers this moment, or everybody that comes at least from the were born in the late 80s, let's say. The 1994 speech made by Berlusconi to declare his rise political figure. So in this case, also everything is completely designed, like the presence of certain kind of books, certain kind of sculpture, also the picture of the family that are there to stimulate the feeling of the spectators and to welcome a certain kind of value, of course, family value, conservative value, and so on. So somehow the design of a TV show is collapsing in the design of a domestic space, and we find this project by Hannes Meyer very telling, because it resembles a very basic set design for a TV show. If you see, like, you have just the fabric instead of wool and few very stark objects in the space, and it's quite similar to this, like which is a green screen architecture. The green screen, it's a quite simple technology used at first for cinema production, but then since technology evolved in much more efficient tools for cinema, the green screen became obsolete, and they started to be reused by normal people for changing completely their background, and replace the background, the green color, with very interesting visuals. For instance, most of the gamers use the green screen for putting their gameplay in the back of as a background, in order to be simultaneously present while gaming, and so this is a kind of TV show, is a kind of spectacle, and probably for younger generation is the most entertaining spectacle. Since then, we started to generate a series of projects. We started to create a series of projects that revolve around this idea of the green screen architecture, and how this can be a practice that is involved in the design of a new kind of domestic space. The first project, it's called Chroma. It's the design of a blue surface for the studio of a photographer. And we also created an Instagram filter that was replacing the blue key with our images. It's a very simple project that didn't get through because of COVID, of course. And this is instead another project we developed together with Angar Bikoka, Terraforma, and Uniqlo, which was a special infrastructure for small spectacle, let's say. The visitors were asked to bring some old clothes to be recycled, and they were having in change a green t-shirt, and all together they were creating a sort of human green screen in which we were kind of projecting phrases and messages to describe climatic condition, let's say. Because all the project was involved in a sort of brainwashing strategy for Uniqlo. These are some of other images. And also this project didn't get through because of COVID. And we were kind of very frustrated because we really liked this direction. And we present another project, a similar project for the selection of artists for the Tbilisi Biennale last year, called Nico. And this project, we were able to build it, and we were able to realize this project at the end of all, finally. And I mean, the project itself, it's a non-stop stream dialogue between two cities, between Milan and Tbilisi. And we designed two pavilions, one in Milan and the other one in Tbilisi, in two different locations, very different from each other, because also we wanted to put in connection two very different institutions. One is the Biennale of Tbilisi, which is a very young institution. I think last edition was the second one. And the other one is Triennale, which is one of the oldest institution forming about design. And the two institutions works in two completely different ways. One is geolocated and based on a super cool building, which is Triennale of Milan. And until some years ago, nothing happened outside the walls of Triennale, financed from by Triennale. And another one is Biennale of Tbilisi, which is instead an institution that is very young and understood how there is a kind of parallel dimension, the dimension of the social media that could be exploited, and is based on that. And it was very resilient because of that during the pandemic explosion. So we proposed this project, and we were able to realize two pavilions, one in Tbilisi, one in twin pavilion, one in Tbilisi, one in Milan. And they were the design is based on this blue curtain going around the circular space and generate a sort of perfect domestic space for a streamer. Also, the furniture were blue, and everything was kind of designed as a television set. This is again the location of the Tbilisi Biennale that happened in a very peculiar space, an abandoned station of the cableway in Tbilisi. Very nice space. And we also curated a panel of events and a panel of takeover, calling artists from around the globe that are involved in the so-called internet art movement, post-internet art movement, and all work using digital tools to generate art somehow. We have some of them. Some of them were quite established, actually. Like, for instance, David O'Reilly or Ryan Skavinsky, which is a teacher in the US. And they were using our blue surfaces to replace that with, let's say, their artwork, and we streamed everything 24/7 on Twitch. The visitor, something happened somehow. It wasn't expected, this kind of reaction from the spectators. But the spectators were so used to be simultaneously the spectacle itself, and they were so used to interact with the screen that they didn't care almost at all about what was going on in physical space, but instead they were super attracted by all the screen that we put around the space. And they suddenly, I mean, in a few seconds, they individuated the position of the cameras around the space, and they start like to interact with that, and they start like to perform in front of this camera, being quite conscious to be streamed on Twitch. And as you can see, like, maybe some videos are more telling. Let me just switch here. Meanwhile, everybody can hear me? Is there any kind of problem, Rossella or Aurora?
No, everything is all right.
Okay. So for instance, the video they are showing now, it's an event we organized together with Elettra Fiumi and Giampiero Frassinelli. This is a conversation between the two of them, put on Zoom, and using as a backdrop the blue screen to show the video that Giampiero produced during this year in Super Studio called the 5 Fundamental Acts. And this was one of the event. For instance, another one is this, which is a very peculiar performance by a music collective called Tibli Orcha, coming from Tbilisi. This was staged in Tbilisi, and they were performing using the visual in a very quite peculiar way, transforming their own body and their own clothes, like other kind of videos. This was quite an experience, I have to say, like 5 years music of techno music non-stop. Coming back to, sorry, coming back to the presentation. And this was Nico, which is a project that we developed together with Tbilisi Biennale and Triennale last year. And since then, we started also to produce design for private. So we've been asked and we've been commissioned with project about the design of domestic space as a set for streaming. So this is just one of the projects that we're developing. It's the design of a bedroom for a streamer. He asked us to create this sort of bookshelf where to embed some object, some digital tool for his stream. And these are some images. As you can see, we put like this sort of LED screen embedded in the bookshelf that is informing the spectators about the next stream, or is informing people about information about the streamer, or it's streaming the chat itself, which is one of the elements that are a fixed element of the streaming. And of course, we put also a green screen where the streamer can replace the green with visual that he wants to show. So this was the last slide, and thank you very much. And maybe, yes, I should interrupt the condivision sharing. Thank you.
Thank you, Luigi. So maybe we can ask to the guys of the group number 30 and 35 to switch on the camera and the microphone and start with the question.
Hi.
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 Hello.
Good morning.
Hello. Can I start to the question?
Sure.
How Abhinobal was born from a creative organizational point of view. So we know how your common starting point was at Roma, from which you took a very different path, focusing on the message you want to be transmitted, then on architecture as a final product. Is there any particular reason related to studio experience? Is it an evolution of ideas you have been carrying forward for a long time, or during university, for example?
I think in your question there is already the answer. Like, I mean, I think you understood what was like the main starting point for us. Of course, like it's abnormal, is informed by our personalities and our kind of obsession, you know, like growing up as a architecture student in 2000 and from 2010 to 2000 and let's say 16, 17, we've been quite interested in how the physical space has been hijacked by the presence of the digital environment, this new kind of Leviathan that is growing up, that was growing up. Now it's quite established, you know, like we were students when this was becoming a phenomenon, and it was actually reaching a critical point. So, I mean, of course, as architects, we were fascinated by this event. We were also quite scared and to become obsolete as architects, because of course we, as architects, we don't have the knowledge to completely design digital environment, and we started like to experiment and try to see which is the relation between these two realms. And of course, like coming from OMA, we're kind of exposed to a certain approach to research, which I think could be summed up in the phrases, in the expression digital hoarding. Because if you see most of the OMA research, the AMO research, let's say, it's a compulsive scrolling of phenomena all around the globe in order to be sublimating in a statement. If you see, like, for instance, I mean, starting from Delirious New York, it's like sublimating the essence of New York in one single statement, which is the culture of congestion, no? And if you take the countryside, well, the same attitude has like expanded to the planetary scale, and they are looking to every fucking phenomena in the world to sublimate a statement that, I mean, in my opinion, never came, and then never resulted in a statement. But that was the idea, the initial idea. And so we were exposed to this way of doing research, and we started to look around and to see what is going on. Why? I mean, as architects, we are in any case involved in digital network, social network, use social media, and so on. And we try, of course, to give us an interpretation of it. And I think this is, I mean, share screen architecture is exactly that. It's an attempt to sublimate an attitude, you know, like a certain kind of environment in one statement.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Okay, good morning. First of all, thank you very much for this lecture.
You're welcome.
My question is about Project Nico, and that expresses that that internal architecture can be influenced by reality. And my question is how much the possibility of creating places where virtual dialogues are promoted due to the COVID linked to architecture can push the observer to visit an architecture or a virtual reality installation rather than a live one? And do you think the virtual reality can take over in the future?
Okay. I will start with the last question. No, I don't think that virtual reality will take over completely. I think there are like two separate things. And I think there are like completely different kind of experience. Of course, like I cannot see the future, and I cannot tell you, well, architecture will still exist in the future. I'm just thinking that like there is some kind of point of connection between these two dimensions, which are overlapping each other. And as abnormal, we are kind of experimenting to find this kind of point of connection between the two. And it's a very niche, it's very small and strict trajectory. I don't think that all the architects should turn to digital environment, to the design of the digital environment. I think as human body, we will always need to have like a comfortable place. And of course, I mean, through the years, we are becoming much more and more inadapt to the natural environment, and also natural environment is changing because of climatic conditions and so on, and the environment that we are beholding in a few decades from now, it's not very comfortable. So we will probably need more and more architecture and rather than digital space. Digital space, it's a leisure space. I think architecture will change drastically, but it will always stay. It will always stay, of course. I mean, the question would be like, what would happen to program and to functions when we don't need neither program and function, because we can do everything with our smartphone? That's the question, and I think designers should, you know, turn their attention to this question, and that could give lots of insights, could give lots of inspiration to produce new kind of space, maybe. I think so, yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi. My question is about that. For the realization of your images, it is necessary a paradigm shift and get out of the box. How it affects on openness and imagination of those who produce it? You think it might be a good exercise to improve the compositional skills of an architect?
Good exercise. Well, I think when you study architecture, you're studying a language, which is the language of the form, no? So and you are after a while you are able to express yourself through this language. I mean, personally, what I do when I produce these images is using this language to say something else. I don't think that our images can be translated as architectural project. They are rather let's say visual artifacts that are telling some other messages, as your colleague was saying before. No, we use architecture to express ourselves and to say something else. We don't use architectural representation as a tool to express architecture. We use architectural representation because we were used to learn it, and we are trained as architects, and that's our language, our mother tongue, let's say, and to express our artistic sensibility. And since I'm not able to paint, or I'm not able to sculpt, but I'm a little bit able to design, and I'm a little bit able to realize a physical and three-dimensional object. I'm using that as a tool to express myself. So I think the architect, it's another job. I mean, the four of us in Abnormal, we are in any case running our job as professionists outside the practice of Abnormal, while we are using Abnormal as an artistic experience. Yeah. I don't know if I answered to your question, but tell me if you need more information.
No, it is clear. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi.
Hi.
So my question is pretty linked to your last answer, but is your work just a utopia capable of capable of sending messages and expressing your thoughts, or quoting Yona Friedman is a realizable utopia? And if it were in the future, do you intend to push yourself to architectural works, even with the functions, or would it somehow in conflict with what are your initial ideas and initial premises?
No, I mean, to answer to your question, no. I mean, I would be terrified to realize Abnormal as a project. I mean, we are like, of course, we're developing design project as designer, as architect, and spatial. Pass me this weird formula, spatial practitioner. That's how people call us in other occasion. But yes, no, I mean, I would be terrified like to live in a world designed as an abnormal image. Also because like in abnormal images, they are very colorful, and I mean, the first message, the first feeling that people have when they are in front of this image is, oh, amazing, like how colorful is this space they are designing. And but then if you look closer, there are like some details that are quite terrifying. Like for instance, the first image that I show in the presentation, I mean, there is a rifle in that image, you know, like it's not, there are some hidden objects that are quite horrifying in some ways, and this is because like images of abnormal are interpretation of the present situation around us, and we use that as a kind of mood board to understand the world. And so it's not an utopia at all. Like we are not speaking about future. I mean, we are speaking about future when it's the futurability, you know, like we are speaking about future when there are people around us that speak about future, and but we don't propose any future vision. Like we think that the idea of the future is an argument, is a theme, is a topic that is present in daily discourse. And I mean, in specific, the idea of future, which is linked to the idea of utopia, dystopia, or whatever, it's a very specific topic that was at the base of the modern era. And I think that today that disappeared. And that's why we also in a derivative way speak about the future, because the idea of the future doesn't exist anymore today. And there's no Le Corbusier saying that like in the future we're going to live in healthy and pretty well designed space that like, I don't know, like there's no book Mr. Fuller telling about a world in which all the nation cooperate to create a giant spaceship Earth. That era is already ended, and when that era collapsed, the idea of the future disappeared, and we are left with this kind of fragment of this giant plan of the future. And as abnormal, we use this fragment to create a narrative, to create not architecture, sorry, to create projects now, to reflect on the present. I mean, to give you an example, I think there is a similar attitude, but just in architecture. I mean, it's completely different. It's a little bit far-fetched as a comparison, but I think there is this sort of feeling also in architectural practice come from France in the last decades. I'm speaking about Moto or Bruter. They are using the fragments of the modern architecture language to collage them in architectural project. And I mean, I think in some ways we're doing the same, but with the ideas, not with the architectural typologies or architectural aesthetics, let's say.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My question is if you have any advice for us, because during the university course, I didn't have a direct contact with the typology of illustration that you use to represent a project. So how can we get out of a concrete idea of representation like a render or a technical drawing and start using your type of communication? And what were your landmarks?
Well, I think I'm sorry. When we started, I mean, I think maybe Aurora or Rossella could remember the moment in academia when everybody started to criticize photorealism and started to use collages, no? Right? And I mean, I think we've been inserted in this niche, no? Like we've been inserted as, we've been described as collages artists, yet we are using rendering tools. Like we're using Cinema 4Ds or V-Ray or whatever, the most technological and advanced tool appear in the market. But we are using that in a very dumb way. I mean, I wouldn't suggest you to do the same things that I'm doing daily, because I think it wouldn't describe quite well an architectural project. I mean, it's a description of an idea, but it's quite difficult to give the exact aspect of a future realization through that kind of rendering style. Apart from that, I think that there are many tools that can be expanded in the artistic field. And I think there is a sort of prejudice against rendering tools, or at least it was present when we were studying, because of course, like we've been told that rendering tools are mainstream, you know, like, and they are kind of not cool, let's say. Doesn't represent coolness. It's a nerdy, geeky things to do, doing renderings. And in fact, most of the people that does professional render are categorized as renderists, not as architects. No? But I mean, I suggest you to look at the software that you use daily and to look at the kind of logic that is behind this software, to understand how, like, the algorithms that is behind any kind of software is establishing a certain kind of hierarchy. In the same way, Instagram, Facebook, or whatever, through the design of the homepage, are establishing a certain kind of message and a certain kind of hierarchies that we should be more aware of, I think. And because, like, our culture is how do you say in English, vehiculated through this software, and it's censored by the structure of the algorithm. And in the same way, your designing process is limited by the software that you're using. So I think we should really look into these things, and we should understand it, and we should use in a more critical way.
Okay, thank you for all.
You're welcome. Thank you for the question, though. They were very interesting. Thank you. Thank you for the conversation.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Thank you for your insightful presentation.
Thank you.
My question was, your approach to design is pretty actually unconventional and subjective, right? So maybe that's why the name abnormal, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
I was just wondering, have you ever had any like negative criticism towards your works? And how do you deal with that? And does it even affect your motivation to continue working on your ideas? Because like you said, that it is a side thing. It's not your first venture. So does it really affect your continuation of working on those ideas or not?
I mean, you mean the negative feedbacks?
Yes,
or?
the negative feedbacks. Yeah, how do you deal with those negative feedbacks?
Well, first, I think in our time, there is a lack of sincere and honest negative feedback. We're living in a bubble, you know, like where everybody that approach what you're doing, they approach it in a positive way, with the positive vibes. It's like just a cheering redundancy, you know, like people don't say you in your face, you're doing bad works, you know, like, and if they're doing that, they're doing behind your shoulder most of the time. So you're never aware. Okay. I think, yeah, I mean, of course we had like some negative crits, and but I don't know, like these are a precious moment, you know. Mm-hmm. Like when you have like a negative crits, it's
like do you learn from them?
You
like,
learn from them, yes. And you grow older, you grow more, you grow better after that. And yeah, I mean, honestly, I would love to hear people that sincerely said this is wrong, or this is banal, or you should move forward, or you should move backwards, or like, but still, it's an artistic practice. I mean, you as an architect can receive negative feedbacks when you operate in the public environment, in the urban environment, or in relation with a private client doing his own house. And yes, of course, it's allowed to be negative, and people should say, no, this is wrong. But try to see around you. I mean, you guys live in Torino, or you guys live in, where do you guys come from?
Torino, we study
Torino? Yeah. Okay, Torino, it's a little bit less than Milan. I mean, it's, if you see Milan, around Milan, there are like popping up projects of urban transformation, and every project look towards sustainability and greening and happiness, and like everybody coexisting together, and yet the output doesn't produce this effect at all. Like it's producing just inequality. And but these projects are sold as, you know, the perfect and the best solution for the future of your kids, of your family, or well, nobody is like saying anything about this. Like in the 70s or in the 60s, people were like creating committees to criticizing projects,
Yes.
and this is not happening. Like, I mean, in the last 2 years in Milan, like we witnessed the success and the failure of at least 4 big urban transformation. Nobody says anything. So, I mean,
So you believe like people should be more critical to get better results?
yes, definitely. Definitely.
So like, again, I'm sorry, for your projects for this abnormal, like you said, you have received some critics, right? Because
Yeah, of course, sometimes it happens, but it doesn't really affect our.
Yeah, your ideas and stuff.
Yeah, but again,
honestly, I found the products really interesting. The especially the pervasive something. I remember the name. It's very interesting where you say that why do you show like the pipes and why do you want to show the pipes and everything, not show and hide them in the house when you can have them. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, have you ever read Rainier Barnum?
No.
You should. Okay. I mean, most of his text is like a criticism of the modern age of technology and how it affects spaces. He wrote also like probably one of the most important theory book of architecture, which is Design in the Second Machine Age, which is a huge book. But then like he wrote many essays which are probably more relevant, and one of them is A Home is Not a House, which I suggest you to read, because it really reflects on this. And he also cite some project as an example, putting them in comparison to understand how they use the idea of the machine, like some of them as a fetishism and some of them as a sort of empty slogan. Like for instance, Le Corbusier is using that as an empty slogan. At the end of all his projects are wonderful, pure concrete architecture, you know, but they are not a machine at all. Yes. But then like you have the project by Bucky Fuller that are machine, like he designed super dumb and horrifying shape, but there is technology inside and they work and there is a dynamic, you know, like, and so, I mean, who is sincere and honest between the two? Like, I mean, you have like to see this and how this kind of attitude is reflecting on everyday space design.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you for your presentation. My question to you is about your representation style. So I find it quite fascinating. So first question is that the choice of colors that you have in your renderings, the pastels that you choose to do they have, like, you know, does that mean something to you, or are they merely for aesthetic? And secondly, do you think that different rendering styles have a different impacts on the project? So these are the two questions.
Yeah, first of all, congrats for your background. It looks amazing.
It's my wallpaper.
It's super nice. And second, I mean, I will go backwards. Yes, of course, rendering style affect the presentation of a project. It's quite obvious because, like, it gives a message. It's implicit a message in the rendering style you're using. And I think architect should be able to go from a rendering style to another according to the occasion. And yes, thank you, Aurora. It's exactly that. And then, like about the colors in our images, this is quite weird to explain because it's not linked neither to aesthetics or neither to our personal appreciation. Of course, there is an aesthetics that comes out of the image, but these colors are okay. So basically, like this color comes out from the process that we use for producing an image, and we use this certain kind of process for using tools in a not efficient way. It's a statement, no? I want to use technology as a dumb boy, and let's see what happens. Like, this is the main behavior, no? And then using normal vector in this way, produce that kind of gradient of color that we, of course, correct a little bit on Photoshop, but not that much. And we use, let's say, rounded object because of this aspect. If you see our images, there is plenty of rounded object, because rounded object generate a pattern of vector all different from each other. You know, like the normal vector are not directed in the same direction when you have a rounded object, but they are directed in all with a different inclination, and that resulted in a gradient of color. Okay, so I mean, it's a sort of form of automatic process, no? We don't design, we choose some object because we know that being spherical or being circular, they produce that kind of gradient. Okay, so I mean, this is why we use this color palette, let's say.
Okay, thank you for your answer.
You're welcome.
Hello, my name is Ifra. Okay, my question, you have discussed this thing before with the member of previous group about technology and architecture, but my question is like, right now we are going through post-COVID period, and in future we might encounter some health emergency or anything like that that can limitize the mobility or that can limitize the human interaction. So what do you think, how architecture can work with the virtual reality, and how can we increase the human interaction, keeping the sense of distance and the limitation of mobility, but also respecting the human emotional requirement? So how can architecture cope up with that thing?
I honestly have no idea. Like, I think virtual reality, I'm a bit skeptical, honestly. Like, I don't think virtual reality is restituting anything very relevant in the architectural discourse, and we use virtual reality as abnormal, of course, but I'm honestly a bit skeptical about it. And some of my colleagues could say something opposite than me. It's a very personal. It's not that I'm speaking for Marcello, Davide, and Mattia. They have different position on that. But my position is that, like, virtual reality had the chance to reach its peak much before than now, and it didn't. It didn't because the money that the company had to spend on virtual reality were so many that they choose to develop the technology in a very more slow process. Mm-hmm. And since they didn't reach that acme, they didn't become virtual reality, never became cool. And I mean, that creates some skepticism in people. And maybe, I don't know, I'm not like foreseeing the future, but maybe like something could happen. And but this pandemic explosion showed us that we don't like fake things, but we like to see raw and crude spectacle. As I was saying in the presentation, you know, like of course, virtual reality had a little bit of an explosion, but instead of virtual reality, the biggest things that happened is that people started to buy lots of things from Amazon, like to collect objects, you know. They started like to decorate their house because the house was the main environment that they were experiencing, instead of like abandoning the house for the outer world. And please go.
But the thing is, like, if we see, it's the human need to interact, and architecture plays a major role in that. How can, like, even if we see in the urban spaces, architecture plays a major role how we design the space and how can it can create some interactive spaces. Like the main word that we use in architecture, that we have to create some interactive spaces where people can talk to each other and they can exchange the ideas and things like that. So like in the future, if like right now we have one scenario during the COVID period, we couldn't interact with the people, like it was very limited. So in future there can be anything apart from this health emergency, there can be any other thing. So what we can like, because I saw one case study, I don't remember which architect did that, but that was like they created a small society, and in that society they added every available, like all the services from minor to the major services, and it was more like city within a city. So if we start to create, like when we have limited opportunities, so if we will start to create small groups, so that will actually create very limited things. So where will the idea of interactivity go in the future? Like how will architecture cope up with that thing? Okay, with virtual reality we can
I mean, Ifra, what's your opinion on that? Like would you like to live in the world that you're describing? Like,
no, obviously no. It's the human nature is to interact with people. That's the thing. Like if we create some small community and we have to live within that community, that's not the idea of architecture. Like you need to interact with the outer world. So like right now we have one example. So what do you think what we can do in future to cope up with such kind of scenarios? Like architecture will play a major role.
It will play a major role, yes, as many cases, but there is a problem that architecture suffer I mean, architecture is always late. It's in the structure of architecture. It always has been late. It was able to express the zeitgeist when the zeitgeist remained the same for centuries. And that was in that case, of course, it was expressing a society. Now I don't think so. I mean, we are like living in cities that have been designed in the case of Italy, like has been designed the most recent probably like a century ago. And I mean, what is the zeitgeist in this design? I mean, and also like a project, it's already obsolete in the moment it start the building site. Like this is the it's suffer of this shift. You know, there are many other things that are much more on time than architecture. And I think what we are doing in Abnormal, it's also about that, because as set designer, we are able to build stuff in a very limited amount of time, and then we don't suffer of future criticism because our design suddenly disappear in 2 months. And we can forget about that. We can forget completely about that and become something else. And this is the zeitgeist of society. I mean, simultaneously there is everything about our life stored in a server, and but then like people forget about things in a matter of minutes. So I don't think architecture will play a major role in solving problems. I think it's everything. It's on the hand of the few that are writing policies. And of course, the design of the urban space, it's a big issue in terms of CO2 emission and so on. But like, I mean, to solve that issue, we should make a U-turn and go back to the going back to 2 centuries ago. I don't think so. Honestly, I'm not there to tell you everything will be okay. I'm not that kind of designer. Sorry.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Okay, so while looking through your works, I saw that you have described your work as a symbolic representation of the intersection between internet, gaming, and religion. And I was wondering what was the concept behind linking these 3 topics that seem unrelated, and how do you apply them to your
It's
project?
a very odd intersection, I understand. I mean, through our conversation among the 4 of us, we kind of interpret the compulsive use of media as in a sort of rising cult, where the object of the worshipping, it's ourself. Okay, it's a cult that where the god is the human figure that comes out of the screen. Okay, and it's a pantheistic cult somehow. I mean, if you see, there are many intersections. I mean, if you look close, the way we deal with technology and with social media in specific, it's very much similar to how religion are formulated. And I mean, I don't want to be, how do you say? I'm not saying that this is a reality, of course. I'm saying that the strange intersection between internet and gaming, and the fact that there are this rising figure of the game player streamer, where people keen to pay to see the gameplay. I mean, it's similar to a cult somehow. It's similar to that. If you think about like the fact that in some streamer have their own set of emoji and emoticons created just for them, and that people are keen to pay for using this emoji. I mean, it's really similar to an X photo, you know, like you buy like little things for wishing you luck. I mean, it's similar. I mean, I think it's quite similar, and it's quite intriguing for me to see that in this way, and it gives me many insights to see it in this way. So that's why
it's quite interesting actually to think of it that way. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. You're welcome.
Thank you.
So do we have other questions? Otherwise,
hello.
Go. Hello.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Thank you for your presentation. It was very fascinating. And well, I got most of the answers in your presentation and the previous questions. But I was just like wondering, how did you like evolve these idea and who actually started, and how challenging and compelling it was for you and your team to work on these different ideas, like to game and architecture. So
No, sorry, can you repeat, because my audio went off for like a bunch of sec.
okay, my question is that how did you evolve this idea and like how it developed over the period, also how challenging and compelling it was for you, for your team to work on it with the different ideas, to start with different themes.
Well, I think it happens to us that like we develop some ideas, then we realize one project based on these ideas, and then we get quite bored with that ideas quite suddenly, you know, like if we say, no, I mean, this is kind of already old, already kind of experimenting with these things in the past. Let's not repeat ourselves, no? And yet, I think that if you look from the outside, with the ideas that you have, like, I mean, most of the people doesn't know about that. So there's no pity in the redundancy. And I mean, recently we started like to take some major topic and try to dig into for a little longer, you know, like, so for instance, this idea of the share screen is something that has been developed actually 2 years ago, and we're kind of designing some project with that, but then as I said in the presentation, those projects didn't go through, and we had the chance to do it at the 3rd attempt. So like to realize a certain kind of project, you have to try, test, and sometimes it becomes also frustrating, you know, like, because you're like, in your mind, you're repeating yourself. You're kind of always looking to the same things, and it becomes a little bit frustrating. But then I think with Nico, we had like many surprises, because we weren't expecting the interaction of the people. And we have like an entire hard disk of people, like, you know, waving in front of the camera as a basic thing, but then also people that are like getting angry with us, like, or dancing, performing in flash mobs, or old people like reacting to the fact that they are projected into a digital environment in a very strange way. And I mean, it's interesting also, like you have to hold on until you realize, and then like something nice happened.
Okay, thank you very much.
Aurora, can I just answer to one of the questions that comes out in the chat before going? Because it's quite relevant for us. So I'm reading the question. Thank you, Luigi, blah, blah, blah. I have a question, maybe out of context, but I was wondering if you are going to repeat the possibility of an island visiting school this year. I've seen the experience you had last year, and it was amazing. First, thank you for your feedback. And of course, we are doing that. Me, Margherita, and Sofia from Captcha and Space Caviar are starting the organization right now at this very moment. Yes, please just wait for a few days to see something on our social media. We are doing a website also, and we are organizing an exhibition with the work of the last year, in occasion of which we are going to present the new edition of the school, and it will probably happen either in the mid of July or in the second half of September. We have like to choose between these two time slots, and so very soon AA will publish the announcement, and you can contact them to be enrolled. thank you, because like I'm very happy about this project, and so if you guys want to come, please apply.
If we,
okay.
yeah, if we don't have other question, maybe we can just say hello, because the students now have other lessons. So
fantastic. I mean, it was a very
welcome.
interesting conversation. Thank you for the invitation. I'm very happy. Thank you, Aurora, Rossella, and let's be in touch, and let me know about the future development of the students. If they need anything, I'm happy to help.
Sure, thank you. It was a pleasure for us having you with us and discuss together about.
And of course, also Mattia, Davide, and Marcello. I think I saw that they connect to the lecture, so they probably say thank you, and they're happy as well.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay.
So see you next time.
Next time.
And yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.